The HBO original series, The Gilded Age, is back, and so is the official companion podcast.
Are you curious about how they brought Gilded Age New York to life?
I don't understand.
Which bit is not clear?
None of it is clear.
Want to know where the writers branched off from history?
Well, when you've set your mind on a thing, no one can stop you.
I take that as a compliment.
Watch or listen to the official Gilded Age podcast wherever you find podcasts.
Trip Planner by Expedia. You were made to have strong opinions about sand. We were made to help you and your friends find a place on the beach with a pool and a marina and a waterfall and a soaking tub. Expedia, made to travel.
The amazing Kate Casey.
Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with Kate Casey. And if you love reality TV shows, if you love The Real Housewives, this is going to be one of your favorite episodes, because joining me is the executive producer of Real Housewives of Miami, which I have always said is my favorite of all the Real Housewives franchises. When the Real Housewives of Miami first premiered on Bravo in 2011, it brought something entirely new to the franchise. A glamorous, sun-soaked world full of vibrant personalities, high fashion, and deeply rooted friendships and feuds. After 3 seasons, the show went for a long hiatus. But the demand from the fans never died down. So a decade later, in 2021, it was officially rebooted on Peacock, ushering in a new era of drama, luxury, and Miami heat. Now, what sets Miami apart from the other franchises is its explosive energy, the cultural richness of the city, and a cast that is as emotionally layered as they are meticulously styled. The show dives into the lives of women, balancing family, business, friendships, and heartbreak, all under the microscope of reality TV. This season's cast includes a powerhouse group. You have Alexia, often referred to as the Cuban Barbie, bringing both old school glamour and raw vulnerability, especially as she navigates complex family dynamics. Larsa, the ex-wife of an NBA player with deep celebrity ties who doesn't shy away from confrontation or reinvention. Lisa, a mother and ex-wife of a well-known plastic surgeon who has shared some of the most heart-wrenching moments on the show, especially in the wake of her very public divorce. Gertie, a high-powered event planner, balancing a larger-than-life career with deeply personal challenges, including breast cancer. Julia, the first openly gay housewife in the franchise, offering a completely different perspective as a former model, mother, and the wife to a tennis legend. Dr. Nicole, who appears in this season, but is now just sort of a friend of the show. She's an anesthesiologist and mom, often serving as the voice of reason until she's pushed too far. And then joining the mix are friends of the cast, including Adriana, Kiki, and Marisol, who stir the pot in their own unique ways. And also a new cast member, Stephanie, who is successful and beautiful and bold. So again, today I'm joined by executive producer Matt Anderson from Purveyors of Pop, the production company behind Real Housewives of Miami, to talk about the reboot, how it came together, how the cast was chosen, and why this particular group of women continues to deliver some of the most emotionally charged and visually stunning moments in the Housewives universe. I could have talked to him for hours. I hope that you enjoy listening as much as I enjoyed talking to him. And here is my interview with Matt. Matt Anderson. You know, you were one of my first guests on my show.
I remember that. I was actually just thinking about that today. It was like, how many years ago was that when you started
9.
with Wondery?
It was 9 years ago. Yeah.
It took us this long to get back together.
I know.
That's wrong.
I remember Hernan, who was in charge at the time, said, oh, my buddy, he made Real Housewives of Miami, and then you guys came into the studio on Sunset. It was a great time.
Remember those days in person in the studio? That was great. And congratulations that your podcast has been going this long and that you've had this much to talk about over all these years.
Truly.
And I'm so honored to be back.
Thank you. Well, I think it kind of set a lot of the tone for the show, which was I really liked more of the intellectual discussions about shows like this and behind the scenes interviews. And I could talk all day to producers, whereas I think that a lot of people would assume that it's the talent I would love to talk to. I actually have a better time talking to the people who make it because they have the great fortune of spending time with the talent and really kind of studying all their picadillos, in which I think that I do too. I feel like I look through the producer lens too, even though I'm not employed.
I can tell that from your podcast. That's where you usually approach things. And I feel like sometimes you kind of make the jump, like, I wonder what production is thinking about this or how they're approaching this problem we have. And so I really appreciate that about your show. So hopefully I can elucidate your listeners on something today. That would be my goal.
Well, the first thing I need to say is that, and I've been very open about this, your show is my most favorite amongst all the Real Housewives franchises. I think you guys do the best job on storytelling. It is beautifully shot. I think you show real humanity. And what I think you do better than anybody, and this is high praise, because I often say I think there needs to be more women behind the lens, because I think the stories that are told on Housewives are so important and they don't always exist in other spaces in entertainment. I would have assumed that it was mostly a team of women. I want to thank you for telling these stories in a very generous, sensitive, I don't know. I just think you really do such a spectacular job.
Well, first of all, thank you. That means a lot. And you've talked to some of the greats here on your show. So I'm very flattered. There is a great team of women that do work on the show. So I think maybe you're clicking into some of that, like Maddie, our executive producer, a woman named Lauren, who's a co-EP in post. We have a woman, Dana, who's a co-executive producer in the field, and then a bunch of other field producers, segment producers. So we really do try to populate the production team with that. And, it depends on which character on the show, which person on the show. I should not say character, but which person on the show. They have their own vibe. It's not a one size fits all when you're kind of matching up producers with talent. And it's not that they're always with the same producer, but there's usually a vibe that's struck between producers. And you want the talent to feel comfortable. Like you're in their homes, you're in their offices, you're in their problems. And it really does sometimes come down to a chemistry check and not whether someone's like the best producer or the worst producer. Sometimes it's just about chemistry. And I really try to look out for that when we're matching people up. And sometimes you make adjustments throughout the season because you really do want the people who are on the show to feel as comfortable as they can, because that's where you get the authenticity, the magic. But again, thank you for saying what you said. I do occasionally go on to the Twitter, the X, or whatever we're calling it these days, and just to see, what the dialogue is and what people are resonating with and what they're not. One of the things that I hear, and I'm curious to know if you feel that this is an accurate sort of compliment or descriptor of the show, is people said there's a little bit of an old school Housewives vibe to this particular franchise. And I do not take that in any way as a negative. Like I do take it as somewhat of a positive. And I wonder, what do you think they mean by that? I'm just curious to know. I have my theories, but you're such a educated watcher. I want to know what you think, what they mean.
Well, I think when you go back to the beginning seasons of Orange County and New York in particular, probably New Jersey too, and Nene Leak's story in Atlanta, it was really about leaning into the character development, really understanding each person's singular story, and then the complicated relationships of the group as a whole. I think that when Lisa announced that she was getting that divorce and that he had cheated, and you see their collective response to that, it spoke to this underlying sisterhood that it seems to exist in the same way that it did in the early seasons of those other franchises.
I think that's a really, really good way to describe it. I think maybe there's like also a frivolity and a campiness that sometimes gets lost in some of the shows that maybe dig down on some of the really big drama. And sometimes it's hard to sort of get that effervescence, like once you're sort of dug into a really dark or hard story to tell, which you have to tell on these shows. But I don't know if you know, but I executive produced a lot of the earlier seasons. I did 2 and 3 of New York, 2 and 3 of Atlanta. And I think, well, maybe it's just sort of some of what I gravitate to as well, which
Probably.
is some of that fun stuff that maybe is coming back. Because it had been a while since I produced Housewives, because it was a big 8-year gap between the end of Housewives of Miami season 3 and the beginning of season 4. So maybe I'm just bringing what I bring to the table.
Also, we're probably of the generation where we dipped our toes into reality TV with Real World.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was working at MTV at the time when that came out, and I was gripped from the second it came on. I mean, gripped.
And I feel like younger people are swept up more in more of the competition ensemble shows. So I think our satisfaction level is different. Like, we really want to know all of someone's personality traits, the way they look at life. Whereas younger people, I think, are more caught up in, okay, well, who is going to lose it first?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, they're waiting for the big moment, but like the friction between two people, where I feel like we may really enjoy someone's personal evolution more so.
I agree. I mean, to me, it's more complex in a way, but it's also harder to shoot, honestly, because it's a little bit like fishing in a pond and just waiting till the fish gets the bait. You know what I mean? And you can't force that. Like, it just happens life happens when it happens. It's one of the things in the earlier seasons when we're producing this, where like the shooting period has to just be a titch longer. You know, it was like 8 to 10 weeks. And eventually it's kind of grown to about 14 is like the sweet spot. And life can really happen then. It feels maybe a little accelerated, probably for the people who are participating in it, because they do get into like the shooting bubble and stuff starts to happen. But you do need that time for life to happen, because that's the best stuff, honestly, is the stuff you could never predict. The stuff I didn't go into that season thinking Lisa was going to get divorced from Lenny. And the way in which it happened was so shocking, because if you watch the show, you see the timeline, and there was this hot mic moment where Lenny was really talking about how he was kind of at the end of his rope with the relationship. He didn't know. I did not know that existed until weeks later, because so many people are mic'd at those parties. And when you're monitoring, you only have a certain amount of mics, and you kind of switch between channels and you hop around, and, you know, depending on who's listening to what mic. And if someone walks off camera, generally the audio soup isn't like, oh, well, they want to hear that. They probably want to hear where the cameras are pointing, but all of it's being recorded on different tracks. And then you have our wonderful producers back in post who start their lunch break or whatever it is. They put their headphones on and like, I'm going to listen to track 1 now. I'm going to listen to track 2 now. And they got to like about track 13 or 14. And they called me like, oh my God, you'll never believe what's here. But by that point, I already knew, because Lisa had told me, this is happening, this happened today. I don't know if I'm ready to share it with the women. And that really does come down to their choice, not my choice. So I know what's happening the day that they're all set to go onto that girls' trip. And Nicole is waiting on her private plane, like, where is Lisa? And I'm like, oh my God, Lisa is going through this thing. And I can't say anything to anyone. I hope the plane doesn't take off, because I want Lisa to get onto the plane, because should she decide to share it, it will be a very powerful moment, but I can't force whatever that is. And the whole day we were shooting the day, and she definitely seemed off. And I'm like, I wonder if she's going to say anything. I wonder if she's going to say anything. And it's the weirdest thing to know what's going on, but not to be able to really live in that moment with the ensemble or the rest of the crew or anything. You just got to hope that the cameras are pointing in the right direction when it finally happens. So that moment by the pool was just, I had no idea when it was going to happen. And then it happened. Thank God our team was so ready for it. The cameras are all in the right place where they needed to be. And I agree that it was a really powerful moment to see all the women come together and support her. And I think we see a little bit of that at the beginning of this season when Alexia tells everyone about Todd and sort of him leaving her, and they all kind of come together. You know, we brought the cameras up months and months and months before we were back into production, but it was one of those moments you were never, ever going to be able to replicate. And thankfully, Andy and a woman, Pamela, who's our executive on the show, all agreed, why don't you go down for a few days and see what you get? And I think one of the keys to pulling that off successfully is that we just shot everything in everyone's home. We weren't out and about town. So there wasn't that typical Twitter noise about, oh, they've brought the cameras back up, or they've done this, or they've done that. And I didn't really want that for a number of reasons. And so I thought it was very powerful within the show when we did catch that. And then to like cut 10 minutes later in the episode, and Alexia's like, I think I'm back with Todd. And you're like, wow, this is going to be a wild ride this season.
But it's so relatable too, because when you watch her story, much like a lot of people in our life, you wonder and may have conversations about, is this someone that you truly love and is someone you really want as a life partner? Or is this really about you not wanting to be alone?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question.
Yeah. And I think that that's a lot of the reason the show works, is that there are all these very relatable points of each person's life. Gertie with her health, and especially this season, do you look at me differently? My body looks different. I am spiritually and mentally a different person. I'm a different version of myself. And do you still love me, even though you've been with me since we were kids? Is this going to shift the way that you look at me sexually? I think there are a lot of women who are in that age span that have walked through similar situations. And what's wonderful about Housewives is, again, that it's an opportunity for stories like that to be told and for people to feel seen through these characters. And I think that that was something that stood out to me as something oddly unique after, Housewives has been on for 20 years or something?
I know. Can you believe we're coming up?
I had not seen that story anywhere else.
That's wild, actually. And that's something that we always question ourselves in the room, the producing room, the war room, is like, has this been done before? Is this a story that's been told before? Sometimes the story is what it is. It's a divorce or it's a wedding or what, and you have to follow that story. And we've seen a number of those on Housewives, but it's the way in which you maybe have a point of view on the story, the way you approach the story. But if you can really happen upon a story that hasn't been told before, that's a very powerful thing. I had a feeling that would be a very powerful story. I had a little experience with telling stories of women with cancer on Married to Medicine because Dr. Jackie is a 2-time breast cancer survivor, and she has a whole charity, 50 Shades of Pink, that's surrounded about making women feel better during their breast cancer journey. And when we covered that on the show, her charity really exploded and it grew and it resonated with people. And something about her and her story and what she survived made the audience really, really love her. Bravo knows its brand, and they do a lot of research around all their shows and around all the people on the shows and what the reactions are to it. And I think that's smart because they haven't veered off their brand. But when they did that kind of research on Jackie, like her favorable numbers were just through the roof. They're like, we've never seen anything like this before. Because generally a character on Bravo can be somewhat polarizing, and that is a good character. But for some reason, she is a universally liked character. People like seeing her on the show. And so a journey like that, I think, just resonates at a different level. So when we came to approach the Gertie story, we had a feeling that the audience would really resonate with that. And we had to follow that story because it was so powerful and so immediate in her life. And when you kind of catch someone in the flow of their story at the beginning of season 6, she's like, oh, I have this thing on my breast. I think it's probably nothing, but we should go to the doctor and just kind of check it out. That is the baseline from which we started that story. And as it progressed, it was like, wow, we are on this journey now with her. And, my hat goes off to Gertie and to Russell and to her whole family for letting us see it. And when the first time I saw the cut of her shaving off her hair,
I lost my mind.
Me too. Like in my office alone in a rough cut. And I'm like, that's, something we've seen in scripted shows or whatever. But when you see it live with a real person going through that journey, it's just, there's no, it resonates at a different level, I think. And I think that's why people really love her on the show and are with her on this journey, even this season, as she's recovering from that.
This show is sponsored by Liquid IV. No matter how hot your summer gets, Liquid IV can help keep you hydrated for the adventures ahead. This summer, I'm traveling with my son Jack for lacrosse tournaments. Hot, blazing, sunny afternoons. There is nothing that tastes as good and keeps you as hydrated as Liquid IV. I just tear, pour, and enjoy. And I'm calling out to all of you parents who will also be watching your athletes this summer. This is a game changer. The sugar-free options include white peach, lemon lime, rainbow sherbet, and the new Arctic raspberry. But they've also got cotton candy or popsicle firecracker. Just 1 stick and 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink. 8 essential vitamins and nutrients, and always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. Squeeze the most out of your summer with Liquid IV. Tear, pour, live more. Go to liquidiv.com and get 20% off your first order with code Kate Casey at checkout. That's 20% off your first order with code Kate Casey at liquidiv.com.
Behind the closed doors of government offices and military compounds, there are hidden stories and buried secrets from the darkest corners of history. From covert experiments pushing the boundaries of science to operations so secretive they were barely whispered about. Each week, on Redacted, Declassified Mysteries, we pull back the curtain on these hidden histories. 100% true and verifiable stories that expose the shadowy underbelly of power. Consider Operation Paperclip, where former Nazi scientists were brought to America after World War II, not as prisoners, but as assets to advance U.S. intelligence during the Cold War. These aren't just old conspiracy theories. They're thoroughly investigated accounts that reveal the uncomfortable truths still shaping our world today. The stories are real. The secrets are shocking. Follow Redacted, Declassified Mysteries on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to Redacted early and ad-free right now on Wondery Plus.
Another added component to that is she's a Black woman talking about health matters. And you know from Married to Medicine the importance of that enormous platform. And do you think about that often, about how I get frustrated when people kind of write off a housewife show when, again, I think it's so powerful, such an important platform. For Gertie to be so open from the very beginning about this life experience, and I've spoken to her, and I think she's like been keeping count of all the people that have contacted her to say, I went in, I got myself checked, turned out I had something. You potentially could have saved my life.
Yeah. I mean, that's like what you hope for when you do a show like this, that it can have an impact like that. And you brought up something that's interesting for that casual sort of housewives critic who goes for like the sort of flattened, not thought out critique of the show, which is like, it's all about just women fighting or whatever. And the franchise in the show just wouldn't last if it didn't have that sort of relatability or authenticity also baked into it. Certainly there are women who live larger than life and sometimes have questionable choices and have occasionally unhinged behavior, but also some stuff that is very vulnerable and very real and also very funny sometimes and inspiring other times. So it has to be all of that in order to be a successful Housewives, and to catch all that throughout a season is really, it's not an easy thing to do.
So back to that reboot, it's often said in the Bravo sphere that the women, when they emerged and they started filming, you guys started filming, that they wanted it. They wanted it more than they probably wanted it from the very beginning. And that it's kind of like a standalone, because there are other women at other franchises who they'll say like they're phoning it in. Do you think in working on the show that was something that seemed present, that there was this eagerness to make it work because they really missed being off screen?
I think that's part of it, for sure. I cannot believe we were brought back, but happy that we were brought back, and we never gave up the hope. We always stayed in touch with the Miami women because as a production company, we really believed in the show. And I always talk to Andy about it after every Married to Medicine reunion, after everything. I'm like, Miami, this is what's happening. And he was a really big champion for the show inside the network. You know, Andy does obviously have a lot of influence on the franchise, but he's really a great producer too. And when Peacock got created, they were like, oh, it would be great for us to have some Housewives IP on here to drag some people over to it. So I think that sort of created an opening for us to come back. We had stayed in touch with all the women. I had never met Larsa before because I came on to Real Housewives of Miami, and that became our show, season 2. So season 1 had Christy Rice and Larsa Pippen. And as we got into the second season, we added Lisa, we added Joanna Krupa. And so we kind of felt like we had a full deck, and we wanted to be like Miami. And Larsa was living in Fort Lauderdale at the time. And in my view, didn't make a huge impact on the first season, which is funny because she's such a standout in the subsequent seasons. And as we were talking about the reboot of the show, Andy had just watched The Last Dance, the
obsessed
documentary. And so,
like, what's up with Scottie Pippen? Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that clicked something in his head. He had talked to Larsa and he called me. He's like, I think you should give Larsa a call and just see what's up. And she was really the first person I talked to, oddly. Both my producing partner, Nate, and myself called her. And she was just so charming and at a different point in her life. And she was getting ready to sell her house in Fort Lauderdale and just seemed to be a different person than the one on season 1 of Miami. So I was like, I really think that the audience would be interested to kind of click back in with her life where she is now, because she's got like an OnlyFans. She's a single woman. She's doing everything. And then also Adriana, Marisol, Lisa, and Alexia had that period in between being on the show and off the show to even further deepen those friendships or rivalries or whatever they are. So when we came back to season 4, there was just so much rich soil to work from. And I think that is such a key to a successful Housewives, is really having those hurts and those wins and witnessing these things in each other's lives that really mean something. You just cannot beat that. When you throw an ensemble together of people who don't know each other, the audience is smart enough, they know, and the fights tend to be very much on the surface level, or the conflicts tend to be very much there. And it just wasn't that coming back. I mean, we were firing on all cylinders season 4. But we also knew that there needed to be some fresh voices in it. It just couldn't be a total rehash of the previous iteration of Miami. So I do think bringing Gertie and bringing Nicole and bringing Julia was a really important part of the success of the reboot. And each one of those women, I think, brought something different, something new, something unique, something that pointed towards the future of what Housewives could be. Women with careers, women who are a doctor married to a lawyer, or Gertie, who was a really renowned wedding planner. And then Julia and Martina was very interesting because obviously Martina is an icon in the sports world. And Andy was like, is Martina really going to do this? Like, that was a question he kept asking. And for Nate and myself, we are the only LGBTQ production company that produces Housewives. And we thought it was long past time that there should be a full-time married lesbian housewife. They just hadn't had it yet. Certainly, Housewives had told stories like that before, but not just sort of out of the gate, this is a married couple, this is how they're living their lives. And I thought it was important to do something that was different, that was kind of groundbreaking. People weren't sure. They weren't sure Martina was going to do it. They weren't sure if it was 100% going to work, because, you're adding these new elements to the show and it's really important that it all works. But Nate and I have always believed to try to do something different on every one of our shows, whether it's the reunion set or something, has to always evolve the genre. And then shortly after that, we see Jenna Lyons come on to Real Housewives of New York, and so on and so forth. But Julia was the first. I do want to say that. And that was important to us as an LGBTQ company to really bring that to the table. And I think that's something that we're good at.
Also, I think that each franchise should represent the women that live in that city. So
for sure,
it is like an athlete's town.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't have someone who's an athlete themselves, you would need somebody who's in a relationship with someone. So that's why the Larsa story is interesting, and also the Julia, because for me, as somebody who's like a super sports person, to me, there are all these layers to what happens when you're in a partnership or in a marriage with somebody who is traveling all the time, has all of these fans, all the pressures that come with being an athlete. Who are you when you're the person who's always kind of on the back burner? And I don't obviously see that in other franchises.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When I came on to season 2 of Atlanta, one of the things I had said, because I was coming off of working at MTV for a long, long time, I'm like, we cannot be in Atlanta without someone in music. Like, the Atlanta music scene is so important. And Candy's tape had come across my desk, and I was like, we have to meet Candy. Like, I'd already known her from Escape. So I was like, I was in, and I was like, the music scene in Atlanta is just so rich with LA and Babyface and TLC and all those great groups from the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And I think initially the network was skeptical. They're like, well, she's not who we think of as a housewife typically. And I'm like, but we have to think of it through the lens of Atlanta. And I think she would be really important. And we're coming off of a season 1, which I did not produce, where Kim had these ambitions of being a singer. And I'm just like, just think of what could happen if we had a legitimate songwriter and a producer and Kim worked together. I mean, something could happen, right? And that's where Don't Be Tardy for the Party came from. And I was really proud to put Candy on that show because I thought she represented Atlanta in a great way. And she had a fantastic run. And she and I had always maintained a relationship beyond that after I had left the show. And so that was a real sideline. Sorry to do that. But the point is that you want someone in every city to represent who the city is. And so to your point about Larsa and Julia, I think you're right. And you get to see almost the full trajectory of that experience with Larsa because we meet her in season 1 where she's this beleaguered wife of all these kids and the husband is doing all that and the world is built around him. And then you see her come out of the other side of it. And she's like, I want to be single. I want to have fun. I want to be hot. I want to be on my OnlyFans. I want to be a little controversial. And you get to see the middle part of that, I guess, would be when Larsa was on the Kardashians and you start to see some of that adjacency to stars and what that Hollywood life is like.
Well, she wants things to be on her terms. She had to be on the back burner the whole time. She was married to him.
Well, and I also think being friends with Kim probably had some of that
for
too.
Sure. Yeah.
Because
Kim's also like, you can have all of these ancillary businesses. You don't have to be in the shadows anymore. But then her provocative exploration was probably the beginning of it began with her friendship with Kim. Yeah.
Yeah, but you get to really kind of see it really bloom on the last 3 seasons of Housewives. And I think she's contributed a lot to the show in that regard.
Also, another representation of the city is like Lisa's the young wife. He's the plastic surgeon. There's a total power dynamic issue. Something that people kind of forget about, which I think is an important layer, very relatable to a lot of people with the Hochsteins, the fact that they had fertility issues for so much and how much that may have affected their relationship. And also Lisa personally. And I think maybe the way she chose the partner that she's with now, maybe why she tends to react certain ways. Like, I think we tend to forget that because maybe that was the part of her life that we weren't shooting because it was off the air for that period of time. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we did catch a little bit of the fertility struggle in season 3 of Miami, and you saw that she was upset that she couldn't give Lenny the baby she always wanted to give him. And I thought it was kind of incredible to come back in season 4, and here she is, a mom of a girl and a boy who are so adorable. Yet in the midst of this, like, power dynamic still with Lenny and sort of what is their future going to be and how are they going to raise their children and all of that. But yeah, I think that was a super relatable story for someone whose life seemed so charmed. Here she is, this girl from Canada who came down and she was working in Vegas and meets this guy and kind of becomes the queen of Miami. And she's set up in this mansion and he gives her Botox whenever she wants. And she has like the most insane walk-in closet you've ever seen in your life. And it seems like a Cinderella story. And the most compelling kind of stories to see is when you peel back that layer and you're like, wow, it's like she's made a lot of agreements to be in this world that she lives in right now. And she's also feeling maybe like threatened or not good about her standing in that world because she hasn't been able to provide a baby and all these promises of being the young wife to like this very successful surgeon. And part of that whole picture for like a doctor and his wife is to put the thing on the side of the desk and you see him with his family and all of that. And I think that was really important to Lenny. I think he did really want a family, and his mother Marina is very much was pushing for that. And so I think Lisa felt a lot of pressure. I think there was probably something inside herself too that wanted to start her own family. As you see this season on the show, she had a very complicated history with her father, and oftentimes you want to go back and fix what wasn't right. So I think that her relationship with her children and how close she is to them is a little bit a reaction and sort of a reaction to sort of how she was brought up herself, where she felt very estranged from her family. And it's a beautiful thing that she was able to do that. But I think when the divorce fell upon her, I think not being close to her biological family and then breaking up with Lenny, it was like her world was crumbling around her because she really did build her life around Lenny.
Every big moment starts with a big dream. But what happens when that big dream turns out to be a big flop? From Wondery and At Will Media, I'm Misha Brown, and this is The Big Flop. Every week, comedians join me to chronicle the biggest flubs, fails, and blunders of all time, like Quibi.
It's kind of like when you give yourself your own nickname and you try to get other people to do it.
And the 2019 movie adaptation of Cats.
Like, if I'm watching the dancing and I'm noticing the feet aren't touching the ground, there's something wrong with the movie.
Find out what happens when massive hype turns into major fiasco. Enjoy The Big Flop on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to The Big Flop early and ad-free on Wondery Plus. Get started with your free trial at Wondery.com/plus.
Hey grown-ups, I'm Mindy Thomas.
And I'm Guy Raz.
And we're the host of the #1 podcast for curious kids, Wow in the World.
Mindy, can you believe we have our very own Wow in the World STEM toys?
I totally can't believe it, Guy Raz. 8 years ago, when we started making Wow in the World, we were on a mission to spread the latest wow discoveries in science and technology and innovation. And now we get to help kids discover these wows right at home?
That's right. From the ultimate high-flying air rocket to the light-up terrarium, there's something for every wowzer in your world to play and tinker with.
Grown-ups, you can find Wow in the World STEM toys available now at select Walmart locations or online at walmart.com. Shop the wow now.
The proximity to Cuba and the cast members and the cultural part of it is something that I really enjoy, because I think the best unscripted television programs put you into different pockets of the world and explore other people's lives. Again, I always say, the more you learn about other people, the more you realize we're kind of similar. And Dr. Nicole seemingly has this charmed life too with Anthony, but then she has this whole backstory with her own parents. And I think a lot of it goes back to the culture in which she was raised. And maybe that was part of the reason that it was so important to her to have her own career. I mean, Anthony has all this money, but it's still very important. I'm going to have my own life, my own money. It's something that she probably thinks about even more now that she has a daughter. Talk to me a little bit about the casting of Nicole. And then, of course, Nicole is not really filming this season, but Stephanie has joined the show.
Nicole was a great addition to the cast, and I think she was very favorably met by the audience. I think they really liked her because she did represent kind of the future of what a housewife 2.0 could be. Still living this aspirational lifestyle, but all the other things that you just said too, maintaining her career, holding her own space within those things, which she still does to this day. It's really impressive. She still does calls. She still sleeps at the hospital. I do stay in touch with her. So, I really admire that about Nicole, because would we all do that if we had the life that was set up that way that she has, where they have their own private plane, they have a house in Aspen, they have a house in Miami, and lots of things, fun things to do if you're in the Lopez Martin family. So she was very likable, even though she was aspirational. And I think part of that was because of her struggle with her father and sort of what her relationship was with him. And it just immediately humanized her, I think, in the eyes of the audience. I think the other part they saw about her is that she's a good friend. And I think that oftentimes that can go missing in a housewife show if you're not being careful about, are the friendships maintaining? Are they being good friends to one another? Is this just becoming blood sport? You have to look out for all that stuff. And she was a real good antidote to that, because she was a good friend and she wasn't sort of just grabbing the low-hanging fruit of conflict. It did seem to find her, though, and she was often her most compelling and her best when that was presented to her, because she's so damn smart and she could really argue a point really well. And I don't know if it's inherent. Obviously, she's smart. She made it through med school. She's a doctor. And I think she lives with a lawyer. So I think probably part of that relationship has really sharpened that tool for her. But she was really good in those scenes. But she's, not someone who loves conflict or whatever. And we would often talk about that when we weren't shooting. And I'd be like, well, you were really compelling and you made your point really well. And she's like, I know, but it's hard to do that in this environment. I'm like, I get that. So when she had her second child, Genevieve, and she was going through that postpartum anxiety, we totally respected that, backed off of that. I mean, which was a hard thing to do because, again, the audience really loved her. They wanted to know what she's up to. And that was potentially a big loss to the new season. And we have an open door policy for Nicole. Whenever she would want to come back, we'd be ready to have her back. And I think she would still have a good story to tell and something to contribute. She does make a cameo this season, which I was really, really happy about because I do think the audience would have missed her. And I think she knew that too. I think she knows that there was a whole group of people that came to love her. And she's like, I do feel a little bit of a responsibility to that. And I really admired that about her, that she did decide to do something. So you'll see that in a couple of weeks.
And classy. She's so classy.
So classy, so fresh, beautiful, smart, a good friend.
But I'm not going to fall into this trope that I am not going to be kind or interested in my partner's ex just for the sake of it. Like, we can all be interested in one another and respect. Relationships change. You move on, you develop a relationship with someone else.
Well, so that brings us to Stephanie, right? So we cast Stephanie Soji on the show. She came to us a circuitous way. So we did not pursue her or find her with the fact that she dated Anthony in mind. We didn't even know that initially. She was developing a show for Telemundo that did not go. But she'd been on camera and she was obviously compelling. Pamela Jimenez over at the network was like, hey, take a look at this reel and let me know what you think. We think she's great, but what do you think? And so we looked at her casting tape for that. And, she was compelling. It was a different show, so it was hard to tell. Like, you need to kind of know all the nitty gritty to be on a Housewives and sort of like where that struggle is, what the potential future facing story is. So we didn't really have a sense of any of that. It was just more of a personality reel. And she did pop. That was a business related show. So she was giving business vibes and she's intense, when she does that. And I'm like, oh, is there a softer side? Will people like her? Will they kind of want to sit down every week and know what's going on in her life? And will she integrate with the cast? So those were my initial thoughts. And so we scheduled a Zoom with her to talk in person and kind of poke around some of those areas that weren't on that tape. And went into it just 50-50, like not sure if it was going to be a fit or whatever. And then talked for about an hour. And she really, I have to say, charmed me. And she really did have all those things that I was looking for. And in that conversation, she brings up, oh, by the way, I dated Anthony Lopez. And I'm like, what? Not even thinking that. And so, immediately in my mind, I'm thinking, well, the audience is already going to think one out, one in. Is this the replacement for Nicole? All that, which is not how you really approach the casting. It's like, does this person stand on their own? Will they work? And I'd already begun to think that she would work before I even knew any of this information. And then I already knew that Nicole was on the fence about coming back anyway, because she was going through her own thing at that time. So it wasn't like, oh, great, we'll get her on the show. Nicole will be there. It'll be so embarrassing for her or interesting. It wasn't even that. Stephanie kind of earned her place on the show just by being Stephanie. That's the truth of the matter. But when we eventually did shoot with Nicole, she was like, oh, I want to meet the Stephanie. She sounds, obviously Anthony has a type, which I thought was really
classy
of her. And she asked Gertie to Zoom her, and they Zoomed and they had like a little talk. And I think that they both were kind of dying to meet each other, to tell you the truth. And I think once they did, they both were like, oh, wow, we're really different from one another. Like, there's not really going to be an issue here at all. And I think if Nicole were ever to decide to come back to the show and Stephanie was still on the show, I think they would be friends, actually. That's my prediction of how that would go.
That doesn't surprise
that's a long
me.
way of telling you how Stephanie got on the show, but we're really excited about having her on the show. And I think as the weeks unfold, the audience is going to get to know her and appreciate her the way that I do.
Now, Nicole has said that Marisol was trying to get private investigators to like pull up info. What do you think about that?
I saw that. Did she specifically say Marisol? I only saw the headline, and she said a friend of the show.
You're right. She said a friend of she made it seem like a sidekick. Yeah, you're right. I don't think she did name a specific.
Right. So I did see that, and I did see that the audience just kind of jumped to the next conclusion that maybe it was Marisol. That actually came up in a reunion, and I have to go back and see if we used it. Sometimes that happens, and Nicole confronted Marisol about that, and Marisol's like, oh, please, I have better things to do than to hire an investigator. She's like, people just tell me stuff. No, that is the truth. People do. Marisol's sort of a denizen of Miami. She's been around for ages. She knows everyone. She really, really does. Like, if you've ever gone out to dinner or lunch with her, I went to a Madonna concert with her once, and that was
some
really
people
fun.
have those people surprisingly tell me everything.
And I think that's maybe a little bit of what it is. And I don't know if Marisol is like the biggest fact checker, like once she gets it, but So I think that's how that came, and that came up in a reunion. But I did see her bring that back up on her own podcast. I have to call Nicole, talk to her.
Yeah, talk to her about it.
What she said. But that Marisol had steadfastly denied that was her. You said one other thing when we were talking about Nicole, about sort of the Cuban through line on Miami. And I think that's a really important point that you bring up. Whenever we think about the show, it is certainly a melting pot. We have a lot of different ethnicities and a lot of different points of view on the show. But there is something about Miami that we always view. It should have a Latin through line through it. It just should have that. We don't have that in Housewives. And there's a lot of shows that don't have it. If you see the studies about Hollywood and sort of lead characters and Latina representation, it is very, very low. So that's something I'm particularly proud of with this show, is that there is such a strong Latin through line on the show. And I think the other thing I'm really proud of about the show is that the entire cast is made up of immigrants or daughters of immigrants. And especially in this day, in this month, in this year, I think that the stories are really important to tell, because these stories we're telling on the show are American stories. They're the dream. They're people who came over hoping for a better life, who have made themselves into these really aspirational pillars of Miami. And so I get choked up when I think about it, because I'm really proud that there is a space on the network and in the Housewives franchise for that. That's, I think, a really powerful thing to recognize.
Well, our time is coming to a close, so I want to ask you, looking at this season, what do you want people to know about what they can look forward to in terms of the episodes? And then the other part of it is kind of fill in the blank about the women just collectively. Like, if you only knew. So the rest of the season is a friggin' ride. You can get on and you will still enjoy the ride. We have 2 more trips coming up. We go to Spain, we go on a Virgin cruise, and there's never been a Housewives trip on a cruise ship. So that was another one of those things where we're like, okay, that hasn't been done yet. And that's super, super fun. There are definitely some seismic shifts within the dynamic of the group in terms of the friendships, things you don't see coming. There are truths that are revealed about sort of who may or may not be pulling the strings behind the scenes in terms of how the gossip is getting around and what the feelings are. So a lot of that really good, rich Housewives fun, talk about it at the water cooler next day. There is so much of that coming. There is so much comedy. And as a producer, that is one of the things that I just gravitate towards in my own work. It's I want to laugh when I see these shows. Just Kiki and Marisol are bringing the LOLs, Kiki's
wherever you
great.
go. Yeah, I know. We didn't even get to talk about Kiki. And I think that's one of the things I'll say is you're going to get to know Kiki a little bit better this year. And I think the audience has really been thirsting for that and ready for it. And I think it's the right time to do it too. You know what I mean? Instead of just serving it up, it's
another great immigrant story, to your point. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And so you get to know her story, you get to meet both her kids and her father and her mother. It's one of the things that I really like about our show, and I think people often question about the friends of on our show, is that we often give them such complex stories as well, like that have heart and solo scenes and all of that. And people seem somewhat not confused by it. I think they like it, but they're like, oh, we don't typically see this in a Housewives thing. And so I like that. So we're breaking the format a little with the show by doing that, and also breaking the format by doing one trip and then going right into another trip, because it's literally a day or two. So it was a little chaotic, but it's really, if you look at the suite of those trips, which expand, I think, 5.5 episodes, it is some peak TV. So that's what I'll say about the future of what you're going to see on the show. And then your other question was like, if you only knew.
Yeah, like you are witness to their lives really throughout the year. I know Maddie does this too. Like you're always in touch with the women, and there are things that are not covered offline for the sake of their own privacy or because it wasn't a period of filming. What should we know, or what do you wish we knew about all of them collectively?
Okay, I'll start with Larsa, because I think people have really strong opinions about her. And because she's such a strong character, you often grab what's frontal, right? And so I understand that. Larsa is an absolute dream to work with as someone that works on the show, on time, ready to go, there early, stays late, is a team player. When people are kind of being grumpy about, oh, the mics are hot or whatever, and that happens on these shows, as you know. And she's like, come on, guys, like we're here to do a show, and like we should really respect the guys who are holding the cameras and do what we're paid to do. And not in a like, I'm only here for a paycheck kind of way. It's not that, because she lives her life boldly on camera, but there is something that I respect about someone who can work like that. Marisol, her stepchildren are a dream. Garrett and Hunter, we don't get to meet them that much. We saw them a little bit at the wedding, but Steve has done a wonderful job with his ex-wife raising these kids, and they spend half their time with Marisol, and they just get a kick out of her. Like, I've seen them at the yacht club together, and they'll just sit at the table and have fun and hang out and talk, and it's just like such a great family. It's one of those things to have been in Marisol's life for as long as I have, and to see her go through all these breakups and the loss of her mother and how depressed she was, to land with someone who has like such a solid sense of family and has a great family. Happy for her. And I think that comes across on camera. Like you see it in her interviews and how she occupies her life. But that's something you don't get to see as much on the show. So that's a wonderful thing about her. Kiki's a great mom. Like that's something that you're going to get to see a little bit, but she has a son, a whole grown-ass man, like who goes to college, the first in the generation of her family. She came here, she got him into college. Like that is the American dream. And he is a good kid. So that's what I'll say about her. Alexia, what you see is what you get. There is no act on that. She is as real as it gets. She is not plotting and planning like on the sideline. She's like, I want to come, I want to be myself, and I want to be me. And that's a growth trajectory for her, because she did not start Housewives in that place. She had a very complicated marriage, as we came to find out, with Herman. There was a lot of love there, but there was also a lot of other stuff going on, and he was leading the life that he was leading outside of the marriage. And I think she felt a need to protect that. And I get that. Like, that's her life, and that's where she was living, and that's what she's doing. And then something about coming back with her where she didn't have that anymore. There is a freedom to her when she's on camera. She's like, I don't ever want to hold myself back again when I do this show. Because I think she wants the show to succeed, much to our point that we were talking about earlier. But anyway, so what you see is what you get with Alexia. Adriana is a wild ride, but is a team player, wants the show to work, is highly unpredictable. I think that's something everyone knows about Adriana, though. I don't think there's much I could say about her that you wouldn't know, other than the fact that she is so smart when it comes to art and architecture and culture. And it's something that you're going to get to see on the trip to Spain, where it's all of a sudden like Professora Adriana comes out. And I think where you can zig with a character, where people zag, it keeps you engaged. So that's what I'll say about her. Lisa is just as sweet as you would imagine, just like a glass of champagne, effervescent, fun to drink, hang out with, she is that way. And it's pretty remarkable to see her not let that part of herself go, given what she's been through. I mean, the court cases, the legal battle, the divorce, the whole gossip in Miami, the potential humiliation she probably felt about the breakup and then the new girlfriend and all of that stuff, and the rejection of his family, that would break a weaker person. So there is a strength to Lisa that I think she doesn't often give herself credit for, or the audience doesn't give her credit for. But I've seen it. Like, I've just seen this. So many people go through similar things and not make it in the way that she does and still maintain that sort of sparkly champagne feel. And I really respect that about her. I do.
And then lastly, Julia.
I do not know where she gets her energy from, because she has just adopted 2 young kids. And she filmed the show, maintained her farm. We're often filming quite late. And then she's getting up the next morning and dealing with the kids. I mean, she is indefatigable. It's pretty incredible. But I think there's something about having the kids that's re-injected her life with this purpose and this blood flow that is, it's palpable. Like, I can't, whenever she was contemplating adopting these children, I was just thinking to myself, how are you going to do that? Like, it's so much harder to do that as an older parent than what you were when you had your two daughters. But so she's got a wild sense of energy that I don't know where that comes from. And then Gertie is, well, Russell is a huge Star Wars fan, and so am I. And so there is this Star Wars collection in their house that, like, for copyright reasons, we cannot really show on the show. And the toy room is insane. And I want to go in there and steal everything from Russell. But it is like, he is a major collector. He loves those movies, and he's passed it on to his sons, and they are so adorable. And so that is just something I click in with Gertie about. And she's like, what are they talking about now? And I'm like, oh, so this is what's happening.
Yeah, right.
And we ended up going to Seville, Spain for our cast trip, where a very pivotal scene was shot for one of the Star Wars movies. And I'm like, Gertie, we have to take a picture together and send it to Russell. And we had like the best time, and he was freaking out. So that's what I'll say about Gertie and Russell.
Well, tell everybody where they can watch Real Housewives of Miami and also about Married to Medicine.
Okay, so Real Housewives of Miami every Wednesday on Bravo at 9 p.m., or you can check it out on Peacock the day after, which a lot of people are really enjoying there. And then Married to Medicine, we're filming our season right now, and hopefully we'll be back to you in Q4. Lots of fun stuff with that coming up.
I can't thank you enough. I could have talked for 14 more hours.
I could have. I felt like I didn't tell you enough, but I hope it's something.
Well, we can always do a part 2.
Yeah,
thank you,
absolutely. Matt. Thank you so much for having me.
I want to thank my fantastic guest, Matt Anderson, and remind you to click subscribe. Please leave a 5-star review. I would love for you to join the Facebook group Reality Life with Kate Casey. You can get my list of what to watch every week by going to katecasey.substack.com. I will give you a list of what to watch in unscripted TV. And then also, you can get bonus episodes on Apple Podcasts or on Patreon. And you can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at KatecaseyCA, TikTok it's Kate Casey, and Twitter, Threads, and Blue Sky at Kate Casey. Check back tomorrow for an all-new episode.
Shopify's point of sale system helps you sell at every stage of your business. Need a fast and secure way to take payments in person? We've got you covered. How about card readers you can rely on anywhere you sell?
Thanks. Have a good one.
Yep, that too. Want one place to manage all your online and in-person sales? That's kind of our thing. Wherever you sell, businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 a month trial at shopify.com/listen. Shopify.com/listen.